Right, we get started. We're on air.
Is dit jouw scherm?
Dat is mijn scherm.
Oké, dan zijn we on air.
Yes. All right, everyone. It's like 1:30. So we have our meeting about generative AI use for to grade exams. We have a lot of people that signed up. Way too many for us actually to handle at the university. So we decided to turn it into an online broadcast actually, and we'll record this broadcast so everybody can have a look afterwards at least. We try to film it in an engaging way so that people know that there's an audience here in the room, a few people audience, but then you're also online. We have a few rules that we want to stick to for this event to be a little bit successful. So we record this session. So afterwards people can see what we talked about, and if you don't want to be in the picture, then just close off your own camera, or if you don't want to be heard, don't ask a question, of course. Mute your microphone, otherwise we get maybe lots of background noise. And if you have a question, you can put it in the chat. We'll have people try to pick up on the chat and maybe get out the most important things about the chat. And if you really have a question, put in like a Q and then say, well, this is a question. And if you just want to chat about a little bit, that is fine also. But if you really have a question for people that are presenting, please put in a Q. We'll try to figure that out. So the program is about this. We start now with a little introduction from my part. Then we have 4 cases. Case 1, which will be from Groningen University, Emmen. No, it's my own case. Sorry, it's my own case. It's my own case. Then the second case will be Groningen. Yes, there is Emmen, and maybe we can get Emmen in the picture. Joost, I'm not quite sure. Yes, Emmen, raise your hand, please. Yeah, there's Emmen. Then we have Vaco Bergers from TU Delft. And then we have Luke. I forgot your last name, Luke, but I'm sure I'll remember.
Skywalker.
Yeah. From University of Amsterdam. We have a little break in between so that people can stretch the legs at home or here. And then we will try to finish off with the discussion. The discussion can be in our room. It can be a little bit with the people online. So we'll just see what happens. So we have like a really short, tight program with lots of information, I hope, that people can learn from at home. So I will kick this one off with an idea about the grading with AI on, well, say exams. The thing is, at the university and maybe many universities, there's a lot of things going about in, well, how can we keep the level of our education high while there's a lot of pressure on us to be more efficient, we have less people to teach. How can we do these kinds of things? So what a lot of teachers want to do is to use essays or open-ended questions in exams or maybe in assignments. However, if you want to do that, it takes a lot of time to grade them. So of course that's a hindrance at the least. And so what could we do then with generative AI to lower this burden? Actually, that's quite important. There is a lot of ideas that generative AI could play a very important role in this. It could solve this problem maybe, but given my experience, maybe already the experience of the people that will be presenting, how do we do this actually? And we can take this from various perspectives. So most of the presenters will talk about their perspective on how can we do this actually in a way. And my first presentation will be how to do this in a responsible way. And I will talk a little bit more about this when I go along with the whole thing. So open-ended questions, essays, how to use generative AI to get the workload of teachers not increasing extra. That's the idea that we want to achieve, I think, with all these experiments. And do you agree, the people in the audience, the other presenters? Yeah, they nod, which is really great. So we were focusing at our university on one main topic, and then I'll just start off with my first presentation. I'm already only 4 minutes going ahead. It's not a big deal. How to do this in a responsible way. And I will talk a little bit about this, but also together with Arjen, who's also here, Arjen Heijstek. So when people talk about Arjen also raises his hand, which is great. About using generative AI for assessments, they always use it. Yes, but this is high risk from the perspective of the AI Act. And then everybody backs away a little bit because, well, maybe that is very complicated and maybe we cannot do this. And we at the university, we are convinced we can do this. As long as we stick to a certain kind of core values maybe that are in the AI Act, and maybe use some guiding principles to design our courses or to design our applications actually. And Well, what would they look like then if we do stuff like this? So I'll walk a little bit through these core values and these guiding principles, and I'll ask also to you, Arjen, what do you think of these? Because you have like really elaborate ideas about this. So the main thing about the AI Act is that you prevent injustice. So people should not be be targeted in ways that are like discriminatory, or maybe that are less fortunate for some people. It should really prevent injustice. And the other thing is that everyone that does things with systems, in our case, that would be teachers and students that make exams or that take exams or that are graded with exams, they should be kept autonomous. They should be still able to move around, to do their own things and not be completely dependent on these kinds of systems. And it should keep education humane. That is a sort of keep teachers and students autonomous, but then it should be like we're humans all together. So we're not systems, we're not the slaves of computers, we are in charge of what computers does actually. And we can translate it into guiding principles maybe, and that's also in the AI Act. So in the AI Act, they say, well, what you need to do, you need to be transparent. You need to be able to explain what your system does. You need to be able to show how the processes are kept in line. You should be able to say who is involved in what kind of step in the process. So that's transparency, I believe. But also, how is the grading for grading of assessments? How is it then taking place actually? What is happening in the system? The other thing that's very important is put the human in the loop. That's a quote from the AI Act. We could maybe even call it better human oversight. And I will ask you about human oversight, Arjen, in a little second. People always say, well, the human should be in the loop. But the question is, where should he be in the loop? And how often should he be in the loop? And should he be always in the loop? And well, we'll present a case, a prototype in which we have a certain idea about this thing. Because we believe that the human doesn't have to be in the loop everywhere and for every decision. And then the other guiding principle is that you should assure continuous evaluation and judgment. So if you have a system, it should already be designed from the beginning that if the system gives wrong answers or gives wrong decisions, you should be able to amend the system so that it gives better output, that it gives better estimations of students' abilities. And also it should be able to correct, given that maybe in our case, students say, well, I don't like the whole thing. I want to have a different grade or another grade, and the system should not be, in those cases, not be able to say, well, no, I just decided this. So there should be humans that really can adapt the whole thing. So these are, I think, the main things that need to be in place for high risk assessments, and they could be in place. And I want to ask you, Arjen, could you elaborate a little bit on these guiding principles and these core values and human oversight as a guiding principle?
Yeah, let's first start with these values are from the Surfwaardekader. So that's our core values we see in education are very important, and these guiding principles come more directly from the EU AI Act.
Yeah.
You see, if the AI Act is we have this act because we want to protect people against powers who are bigger than them.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important thing, if we look at it from that perspective, and especially take decisions who have influence on the career of young people or older people who are part of our education. These are very risky decisions. That's why it's high risk. You have influence, but what they're afraid of, that you discriminate, I think, and especially people who are badly represented in the language models, and so that's an important thing, I think. And then human oversight is one of the key things to go in there and talk about human oversight. You can we better say meaningful human oversight, because there's the risk that people take the assessment of a computer, they value it higher than their own assessment, but that's not what you want to do. It's just so I think you can look at that as a process. Grading is a process, I think, and you can zoom in very close. Every decision of every point what's given to a student, or you can zoom a little out. And I think that's what we did, and see it as a whole process. And in that process of grading a whole exam of all the students who take part in the exam, there should be a human. And that is maybe iterations, maybe corrections on how AI graded and no iteration on it. Openness for corrections from students' part of view, being transparent. And I think that's the path we took to look for solutions.
Yes, I agree too. And I like the word human oversight because it's a little bit more like abstract and broad than human in the loop, which has a very strict idea that you actually see a person somewhere alongside a treadmill or something and looking at stuff or something and picking out stuff. So that's what I really like. So that's really great, I think. And so we will show something that we designed at like a few months ago, and we developed it a little bit further already. But before I do so, I want to say that I am Silvester Draaijer, by the way. I'm from the Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam, from the VU Education Lab, which is part of the VU Center of Teaching and Learning. So we try to organize this not only on behalf of VU, but for everybody that's involved in teaching and learning and assessment and grading. So there's also people busy at NPulse, at all kinds of communities, at SURF, at Lancelot. So I welcome all these people at least over here. And the thing from the VU Education Lab point of view is that we really try to experiment and do stuff. That's why we think this is a very important thing. And the other thing that I think I forgot to mention is that I think everybody agrees that using generative AI, it's quite easy to get some kind of a feedback. You put something in and you get a response. So if you have an essay or you have an open-ended question, you always get a response. So that is not the most difficult part, I think, though you could discuss, well, what is this feedback actually that you get? But the real difficult thing is grading. So that's why we focus actually on grading, on really giving people pass-fail decisions, or maybe giving them a 7 instead or an 8 or something. So the grading is the real difficult part in this topic. So given this introduction, I'll show you a little bit what we try to design or think of in our own university. So the main thing I believe is that if we design systems for, say, large cohorts of students, because I think that's very important also to emphasize, if the underlying problem is high workload of teachers, it's a lot of work to grade or to do something with open-ended essays. It's in particular for teachers that have a lot of students. So for these teachers that we are looking for how to resolve their problem, because if you have like 5 students, you just go to Copilot and do your stuff. But if you have like 200 or 500, then it becomes more difficult. So we're focusing on these large cohorts. So our idea was as follows. Suppose, and I hope everybody sees my mouse moving around. Yes.
There's also a question already on.
Oh, yes. And what is the question?
The question is asked here, other core values include privacy of students. For instance, will my slow learning process or wrong answers affect my career chances?
Yeah.
Sustainability. For instance, I don't want to use LLMs because it consumes too much energy.
Yeah.
Didactic values, is the assignment and the feedback really contributing to achieve the learning objects?
Right.
Is the learning objective still relevant? And are these core values included in some way? That is asked by one of our participants about the core value, that I think the didactical core values.
Yes, yeah. I feel that these are a lot of questions, very big questions, and I will not answer them in this session. So we will first focus in this session on these core values, given that we use large language models, how good will they be in grading? And I'll park these questions for other kinds of meetings about the use of energy or other kinds of things. I think we first focus on this part, to be honest, and maybe we can touch upon this in a later stage.
Is that okay with you, Greg?
Okay, Greg is fine for now. All right, okay. I continue with my little part. So what we think we need for a system is a system that does the following. So suppose you have a student submission somehow, or maybe you have a number of student submissions with a certain kind of, what would I call it, a sort of assignment that they need to work with. Then you collect these submissions in the student submission part. And now my mouse is gone, it's over here. And then the first thing that you do is that you give the system your rubric or any prompt that does the grading at that point. And then there's like an initial AI analysis. The AI gives some kind of feedback and some kind of a grade given you have this rubric. So you will tell much more about this. Then the user, the teacher in this case, please mute your microphones at the home part if that's needed, gets a stratified sample of submissions. So that's the part with a sample selection. And the selection actually says, well, I give you a few submissions that are highly scored by the AI. And I give you a few submissions that are low scored by the AI, and I give you a few submissions that are midway the scoring scale of AI. The teacher, Marco, you have to go, or you have to mute your microphone, please. The teacher then has to grade these submissions by hand. So he really has to go into the submission, watch what the AI has said about grading and what is said in the feedback, and then amends this score. It says, well, I don't agree with this score, or I do other stuff with it. And then if you have manually marked these submissions, you say to the system, do the analysis again, but then use these examples that I already did by hand, given my also feedback, regrade and recalibrate the others that I didn't look at. And then it does, again, it does the grading given your extra input. And then as a teacher, you could maybe have a look into a few other of these submissions and do the same thing again until the moment that you're, as a teacher, you're satisfied with the whole grading. You think, well, there's nothing to add to it now anymore. And then the last step would be that there might also be students around the pass-fail border, and you need to grade all these by hand. So students know that if I fail, that I know that my teacher has actually seen my submission. And only then the grading is finalized and the scores are set. That's the idea of the system that we think is very worthwhile to use. And we want to show you the system, how it looks like. So this is what we made. So we have a step with initial AI grading. The teacher reviews a few key submissions. Then we do recalibration. We have iterative refinement. Sorry, I have a little bit sore throat.
There you go.
Thank you so much. And then there is a final grade and some pass-fail decisions. So let's see how it looks like on screen. I have to move my mouse around a little bit. So what we did, and I think it's very interesting in itself to have a look at the Lovable as an application that does really nifty things in developing actually working products. So this is where we can see the screen that is happening. So I will do a demo of an actually working system. So of course stuff will go wrong, but I hope it will not go too wrong. So here we go. So we have an assignment that I'll make in this system. And I call it a test for today or something. And I can also give it a title. Also interesting. And then I could upload a rubric. I'll show you what the rubric that is. I prepared the rubric just in text format, and I can show you a little bit what it does. And I need to click on the thing that's behind the camera. And then I upload it. And the first step I now did with this system is to already reduce generative AI to analyze the rubric. It's actually a little bit of a good rubric. Can I use it? Can I work with it? So the actual basic view, this is like the text that's in the text file. That looks a little bit like this. You can see what it does. And then the AI enhanced analysis shows a little bit what's in the rubric. So I already have some idea as a teacher as to, am I grading a sort of sensible way? Did I put in a pass-fail score? Did I put in something like a matrix that would be easy to use? So it already makes a summarization about what is in the text actually that I did. So I can award in total 15 points for my assignment. This is my pass-fail threshold. A little bit weird because it's like 15 points. You then transfer it to a 100% scale. There are 5 criteria in it. This is the grading matrix. And you can see that's all in there. But I will not bother you with this little part anymore because you now know it's in it. It says, well, just...
Apologies to interrupt, but we can't see the screen anymore.
You cannot see the screen anymore.
That's weird.
That's weird. We're trying to look in it now, but it's a good remark.
Can
you do something with it?
I can definitely see.
I can see the screen as well.
Must be on their end.
It's on their end. It's on your end. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Other people can still see this.
Okay, great. So let's move on. So we have some student submissions, and I have students that submitted. No, I generated 4, by the way, to generate like 5 submissions for a task to write about whether it would be good or wrong to use generative AI for their studies, and well, does that make them a little bit different in quality? So I have 5 submissions. Here we go. Upload all submissions. Let's upload the submissions. And then I come in the screen in which it says, what is the AI assessment initiation in the meantime? So I could now say, well, these are my essays that I handed in, which is great. I have 6 in them. And then how do I want to grade? And I put up this little box over here to make the grading or the feedback very short or long, because if you don't say anything, you get way too many feedback. So it's very undoable for a teacher to actually work with it. So I made a very short one. And then you start the AI grading. So what the system now does, it gets the submission of a student, it gets the rubric, it puts them all in one text document and then sends it out to our Azure AI backend. And there the LLM, which in this case it's like ChatGPT 4.0, reworks with the prompt and then comes back with the feedback. That's how it's done. So it's a little bit of an answer to one of the first 4 questions that we got. We do it on our own Azure AI platform at this moment, so everything stays at the university. So that's one thing to make sure that you have privacy and security taken care of in a sensible way, of course. We work on our own environment as a university, and we have this part as like a user interface for it, but it doesn't do actually anything that we're in here. So what we see now is that indeed it has graded all the submissions, which is a great idea, which is a great thing. So we have 1 or 2 assignments that got 15 out of 15. We have one that got 11 points. We have one that got 7, one that got 4, and one that got 4. And I know, because I have these things generated in this way, that this is conform how I said the quality should be of these assignments. And then we see that 3 of them are now yellow. They are pending review, because I have now to manually, as a teacher, grade a few of those assessments, like name a high scorer, a mid scorer, and a low scorer. So that's what I'm going to do now. So review key submission. So what I can see now is the student submission over here on the left-hand side, the AI evaluation. So I have my 5 criterions. Criterion 1, what is the argument, development, and position? And then the feedback of the AI was well, it's clear, it's well-reasoned position, nuanced arguments, logical flow, 3 out of 3. And I, as a teacher, could then read the submission of the student, and I could say, I agree or do not agree. And the way in which we built it now would say, well, the teacher can do some review. So I could say as a teacher, well, the AI review is very good. However, the grade for criterion 2 must be 2 out of 3 instead of 3 out of 3, because you used Gen AI. I'm just trying to do some stuff. I said, by the way, this was like an exam situation in which you had to write these 250 words for this particular assignment. Do you agree or not agree that you should use generative AI for your teaching? So I can submit this. And then it has seen the teacher has reviewed this one. Okay. And I can also do this for these ones that are, I can say, well, AI review is very good. And it also already gives me some kind of idea about, is your review as a teacher, does it make sense? Is it sensible to really improve the grading? Well, I don't take too much note of it now because of it's a demo. And then I have the last one. I have to click this one away. Review key submission. Well, this is even poorer than the AI says. Change the grading of criterion 5 to 0 out of 3. And I touched my all caps thing. Also save review. So now it has said all the things that the teacher needs to do have been done so far, and I can now press the button recalibrate AI grading. So I'll press this one. So what happens now is that it takes the manually graded documents and they put it in the prompt as examples that are graded by the teacher and the AI, in which the teacher says, well, a little bit more like this, a little bit more like that. And then the others that I didn't grade are then recalibrated using my input as a teacher. So the grading of these other submissions are more fine-tuned to my liking as a teacher, what I would think it would be needed. No, it's still working on it. And this is also about the speed that you could expect. So a 250 word document with the rubric text and all the things in it, it goes a little bit like this speed. So even if you have 200 or 300 students, you'll have to prepare this quite well, and then you have to drink quite a lot of coffee, and then afterwards it will be ready. So I hope nothing will happen in between, but this is about the speed that you could expect, and maybe you can tell a little bit more about the speed of all these kinds of things.
Has been active in the chat.
Yes. Oh, Ruth, look, yes.
Questions, right? Can you recap on what the questions were while we wait for it to?
Yes, so there was one question about transparency that essentially pointed to the very familiar problem that large language models are black boxes and we don't really know what they do. Now, my reply to that was that in my experience, you actually can prompt them to explain what they do, and while that is not what they are really doing because they have no introspection, in the context of grading, it usually works well. So I use the example that I used the rubric subtract a point if the student didn't explicitly mention division by 0. It took these points away from a bunch of students who said you can't divide by 0, which is completely correct.
Yeah.
But then because I asked the model to explain what it did, it mentioned, oh, this student didn't say explicitly division by 0. I revised the prompt and then it worked.
All right.
So in my opinion, you can achieve some transparency with these large language models, and you could share this with your students that you.
Yeah. So that's a good thing, and it's a good question indeed. So, but transparency is not only that you can read up to the comma what happens actually, it should also be that you explain what you're actually doing. So what I'm explaining at this moment should be explained to students, of course.
Another question was, do you believe AI is kinder than a teacher, or is it less kind than a teacher?
In general, AI is kinder than teachers, is my experience. But you'll know more about it because you actually did like experiments with actual data. This is all mock data that we try to use here. But that's what I listened in the research that I got. So that's very important. So I actually think that it's for teachers more important to look at the lower end of the whole scoring range than at the high end of the scoring range. But that's up to you to discuss a little bit. Well, indeed, it did some recalibration and it changed some of the grading. So I subtracted one of those, I think. So it was 15 out of 15, now it's 40 out of 15. And it's also extracted one on this side, I believe. So I think, well, I'm done now. I could say I'm done. So what I could do now is just finish grading. But I also could repeat. So I also could say, well, I want to inspect this one in particular. And then I do the same thing. And I submit it again and I do recalibrate again. So that's the idea behind this whole idea. And at the final stage, you could say, well, now there's a glitch in my system because it keeps on, it gets stuck now. But this is the general idea of the whole system. So recapping, AI grading with a rubric, manual inspection by the teacher of a few of the examples, recalibrate the whole thing, maybe some other manual inspection, and then manual grading at the pass-fail score. This is the thing of my of the course. So, given this idea, and given some questions that already been asked, this is again is the flow: initial grading, teacher reviews, manage recalibrated results, refinement, and then final overview. I think this is a very workable way of going about these kinds of systems. So it's something we could make technically. And indeed, you could inspect it if we managed to get this model up for people to have a look at. You could inspect it for yourself. I forgot one thing to mention is that if you type stuff in as a teacher in the open box that I just did, it actually ends up in the feedback for the student. So the student will read, this was your AI feedback. And by the way, the teacher has actually added this to your feedback. So actually you can see that the teacher has done something. Suppose this would work. Yeah, suppose this would work. There is still a lot of research to be done, of course. So it's about how accurate is it actually, the whole thing. That's, I think we'll dive into it. But will students accept this whole thing? Do we need to train our teachers? Do they understand what happens? What if the teacher simply clicks through? What happens? How good is this initial grading? And what will be the gain in consistency if you do this iterative growing? Does it actually do a lot, or is it not doing so lot? Maybe how to check on bias in general and these kinds of things. So these are all open questions, given that we start off using these kinds of systems in the first place. So this is my story. So maybe some questions, and then we move on to Annie.
Shall I just read it out? So I have a question more about legal aspects.
Yeah.
Will this workflow pass a legal test? That's
Yes.
the question.
Shall we do that one first?
Yeah.
So if people ask, do you pass the legal test? I think this question is phrased wrongly. But I think it's the other way around. I think we should present this system. Then we should present there are some general guidelines like human oversight, what's in the AI Act. And then we should say, this system fits within this overall arching view. So it's not it's the other way around. So you should rephrase your question, I believe. And of course, there might be in some universities very strict privacy officers. I don't know who there be, who might say, well, I don't think it fits in. But that's the correct order of questioning, I believe. So that's how we look upon it.
And then another question is, how does this relate to what we already do when we have teaching assistants who grade our work? Will this workflow stay the same, or will you end up using the model on its own with no or less oversight by the instructor? In the former, is it worth all the time investment when compared to the old process of grading with assistants as mentioned?
If you think that assistants are simply slaves, you don't have to pay, then you're correct. Then you simply hire students and they do the grading. But of course, we are under pressure. We have less people to support us. So such a system should actually make it easier for individual teachers to actually handle large groups without incorporating all kinds of student assistants. So that's one thing. And the other thing, we know, I think maybe you can tell with your presentations, that humans do a way worse kind of grading in a consistent way than this system, most likely. So, but that's a very difficult discussion in general. But we could touch upon this in the questions of acceptance by students or the general audience about these kinds of systems.
So my proposal will be, there are still questions coming in. We'll just
list the questions.
We'll list the question and answer them when we recap on the.
Yes, when we recap.
Okay. One more thing in step 2 that we had in the process where the teacher evaluates what the AI did.
Yeah.
I think we also talked about having the teacher already grade a couple of themselves up front.
Very good variation.
And then see, so it's not only an oversight, but this also has some.
There are quite a few variations on this process.
Yes. So also, if anybody has like on this process has any add-ons or tips, please put it in the chat. Yeah.
Okay. So we move on to Emily. Please come forward, Emily.